Diga Namuji. I'm Ian Hunter, a descendant of the Wurundjeri people. I grew up... Oh, hang on, for a first thing, what about that name for Hunter? Is that a good name for an Aboriginal person or what? But you know what? It's got nothing to do with it. Grew up in Reservoir, and my grandfather, my dad's father, was a Scot. We grew up with a lot of culture, basically Scottish. And you know what? Most of my friends and close relatives, they don't call me Ian. They call me Jock. Nothing to do with underwear. I was the piper in the family. I was the one that actually learnt to play the bagpipes and mastered them, mind you. So I grew up in that sort of situation. And I think this reconciliation, there's a particular theme, isn't it, this year? Something about history, learning about it and all that sort of thing. Well, as I say, grew up in the northern suburbs. I didn't know much about my Aboriginal history. It was probably about 25, maybe, probably about 30 years ago that I actually started looking into my mum's side of the family and realised that, you know what, I've been living at that point in time for 40 years in the northern suburbs of Melbourne. But when I started researching, I realised that my family had been living in the same area for between 40 and 50,000 years. So we were the traditional owners, virtually, of where we are now. And then of course, one thing led to another. We were actually doing a whole lot of research and found out that the problem arose that when the first Europeans came here, the problem that they had was they misunderstood Aboriginality. They thought because Aboriginal people had humility that they didn't have pride. And that was one of the big problems, so that they actually thought that they could just walk over the top of Aboriginal people, and of course they did. And they just said, we're going to make laws for you, we're going to look after you, because, you know, oh, hang on. Well, they were looked upon as either flora or fauna, as I think you were mentioning, until the referendum. So they were actually treated like children. But you've probably all heard about the stolen generation. Not in Melbourne. Didn't happen. None of the Wurundjeri people were stolen generation. But there were other indignities. There were other indignities that the people suffered. Like doing research a while ago, what happened was I found a letter in amongst letters of pioneer women, and it had my mother's maiden name on it, Jessie Eileen Nevin. And I said, Mum, I think this is you. Look at this. And I took it home and showed her. That's not my writing, because it was typed. I said, no, but it's you, Mum. Hang on. Yeah, that's right, that's mine. Yep. Everybody had to do that. If you were living in the bush and you wanted to go and visit your grandma and you had to get on a train, you had the right to Mr. Parker. No, Mum, no. Where were you going? Oh, I was going to visit my granny. Her granny lived on the Aboriginal station at Hearsall called Corrandirk. Her granny was born in 1854. My mum was born in 1921. She said, no, if you had to get on the train to go and visit your grandma, you had the right to Mr. Parker. Well, Mr. Parker just happened to be the president of the Board for Protection of Aboriginal People way back then in the early 30s. I said, no, Mum, it was only if you had to go onto the Aboriginal settlement, you had to ask for permission. No. Well, Mum was 50 at that time, and it took me at least 2 years to convince her that no, not every other kid had the right to Mr. Parker to actually go and visit their grandma. She said, I don't care. They were the best times of my life. She said, I had wild food, and we went out fishing and catching rabbits and all that wonderful things. She said, I don't care about that. That doesn't matter to me. She said, because I can remember all those wonderful things Granny taught me. And even to that extent, growing up, spending a lot of time with people that were born in the 1850s, they were still speaking language. Prohibited language, mind you. They weren't allowed to speak it, but they would talk it. But then what happened then was Mum would use some of that language when we were growing up. But when her granny died in 1945, the language was gone and nobody spoke our language. So I actually do get involved with citizenship ceremonies, and that's one of the things I actually implore new citizens to Australia, is when you come to Australia, please enhance what we've got. Don't try to change things, because that's why I can't speak my language, a language that would have been spoken for 50,000 years, see? And the thing is there, trying to explain about enhance. See, growing up in Reservoir, you know what we thought spaghetti bowl was? Boiled spaghetti with Heinz tomato sauce on it and some grated Kraft cheese mixed up spaghetti bowl. But what happened? Greeks and Italians came here. They said, you can put a bit of garlic in it, you can put a bit of meat in it, and all these other wonderful herbs, and that's proper spaghetti bowl. So that's what I mean about enhancing things, not to change things, to make Australia a better place. So I think Mum was a pretty wise lady in her understanding and time that she spent with the old Indigenous people, with the old Wurundjeri people way back then. That song, Geargo Gumbalai, Geargo, go away, Gumbalai, come back later. And how I got those words was my great aunt was being interviewed by an anthropologist, and he was trying to trick her. And he said, okay, what do you call us white fellas? You wouldn't have a word for white fella because there's none here. She said, yeah, we got a word for that. That's Namuji, the ghost ones. Oh, okay. What do you call yourself? Oh, we're Kulin or Wungi. We're the black fellas. Oh. Then he thought he could trick her and he held up a saw. He said, you wouldn't have one of these, a metal saw, would you? No. We do have now, but you wouldn't have words for it, eh? Yeah, we got a word for that. That's 2 words. Geargo, go away. Gumbalai, come back later. So the saw was a go away, come back. So with that, I put those 4 words together. Geargo, Namunji. Go away, white fella. Gumbalai, Kulin. Not an offensive song. It means every now and then, if you can remember that chant or just have that chant in your mind, be like an Indigenous person. Think about Australia the way that it was and always used to be. Like if we go down far enough, we'll actually find soil. There's soil underneath all the concrete. So be a black fella for a little while. Every now and then, be a black fella, you know, and think of people and think of the earth. That's what the song's all about. So we're going to do a little bit more performance. Oh, and thanks to Joey and his daughter. Needless to say, we're brothers. It's not that he was born in midnight and I was born in the daytime. The thing is that, you know what? One of the things that we're trying to get across to some of the younger Aboriginal people coming up with culture now is we need to laugh at ourselves. See, I'm annoyed at how much the Greeks and Italians have made making money, laughing at themselves. Well, we're going to get into that now, and we're going to do that sort of thing, you know, and we're going to be comedians, sort of thing. Like, you know, like, Nunya, can you yell out and tell everybody what we actually call that? Generally, what everybody calls that implement that you got in your hand.
Every time I have to perform with it, is a.
That's didgeridoo, isn't it?
Yidaki time.
Yeah.
And I said, I know I'm a darky.
So that's the traditional name.
Yidaki. Yidaki is another name for it.
It's the didgeridoo. But cheap Aboriginal people didn't name it didgeridoo.
I like to play the didgeridoo. He said, yeah, I wasn't calling you a darky.
Because it's the traditional name of the implement. So we look for all those euphemisms and try to throw all this humour around because you get nowhere by being serious all the time. People remember humour. They don't remember, they do remember it being pointed at, and being pointed at just gets people off the wrong side. So, and I think that was part of what my mother said, look, never ever confront people. Aboriginal people didn't do that. Traditional Aboriginal people coerce people and talk people into things. She said, you know what the problem is? Now, don't be offended. She said, the problem with some of the young Aboriginal people today is they've got too much European blood. And she said, and that European blood makes them too aggressive. She said, and that's the problem with some of these young fellas. They've got to remember the humility of Aboriginality. So we're going to see whether Alinta can actually do a creation dance for you as well.
And the funny thing too about it, my grandmother's father, he came from Scotland too.
Yeah.
My great-grandfather's named Charlie Cameron, and we're of the Cameron clan from the Scottish side. So bloke said to me, he said, I still can't see the Scottish in you. I said, you don't have to see it in me, it's there. And I did the Scottish swing for him with the didgeridoo.
He's 3 days older than me. I've still got some light coloured hair here. So here we go, creation. That's creation. And this is Alinta, Nunua's daughter, and this is our great friend, Mitch. And we're sort of all mixed up, the same as everybody sort of thing, you know, all different nations and different tribes here. I think, now what we might want, I reckon we've got to celebrate today, don't we, Mitch, you reckon? We've got to celebrate. We've got to celebrate it. So what we want is everybody to start clapping. Okay, enjoy the rest of Reconciliation Week, and now you'll know a little bit more about Indigenous peoples. Thanks very much for the opportunity. Murdanjika, Poranamaji, Warangaga.
What did the Aboriginal people do at La Bruce when they stand like this? They saw Captain Cook go like this. I don't know how to play didgeridoo. But we didn't know there was a telescope.
All right, thanks everyone, and look, just a final round of applause for the Yarra dancers. Thank you.